Good morning, everyone. My name is Reagan Sokolowski, and I'm a marketing specialist with ESC Spectrum. Today, I'm here with Landon Zabcik, our software architect, who will be giving a presentation on our latest Prism 1.5 release. All right, Landon, take it away.
Hey everyone, my name is Landon Zabcik. I'm the software architect here at ESC Spectrum. Going to be going over today Prism's latest release 1.5, which we've affectionately termed our largest release yet. We're really proud of kind of all the features that have gone into this, and I'm going to kind of go over some of those today, as well as some of the bug fixes, and then at the very end I'll kind of give a little hint of what may be coming in Prism 1.6. First off, for the first new feature we've added is Prism installers. So we have a brand new client and server installer starting in Prism 1.5. These are self-contained installers that contain everything necessary to set up a full Prism server from scratch, and everything you would need to install all the client applications from scratch as well. So there's two separate ones. They can be run on the same machine if your server is also a client, but they don't have to be, so you can take the client installer and run that on all your client machines if you need to. This really should make future upgrades go much easier, especially on the server side of things. Here's a screenshot of the new server installer. It's kind of its own standalone application. This is kind of what it looks like when you start it up. You'll see it and start it up. You can see kind of the application icon on the left there telling you what it's installing. Tabbed kind of interface as you kind of step through the install wizard on your left, and then the content area kind of in the middle. The first tab you're going to come with is the license agreement. Just kind of scroll down, hit accept license, and the next and back buttons are going to be down at the bottom right. So we've done that, hit next, then you'll be offered an install location. It defaults to the default location, but you can install these service files wherever you want to. Then the database option. So Prism, this can be installed with a blank SQL server that doesn't even have a database in it. It can be installed on a SQL server that does have a database but no Prism tables in it, or it could be installed on an existing Prism installation with all the Prism tables in it. The installer is smart enough to know and not wipe out your current Prism installation and just do an upgrade portion on the database. But it can create everything from scratch, so it can create all the Prism tables for you and effectively set up a new installation. So you're going to point it to that and use the SQL login credentials here, and those there. In the services tab, so this installs all the services that are necessary for Prism. So to go through and install each one of those, you can set it up to use a local service account or give it a particular service account name and password. The only two options you may want to change here are whether or not to use secure WCF communications and the number of data collector instances you want to install. That's kind of something you'll have to know about your particular configuration, which is typically, how many sources you're going to be communicating with, how many 8864s, things like that, because we do install one service instance per device. So that's why that's a selectable option here. Click next. This also installs the reporting server, so just point it to that. Then you're going to get a confirmation page telling you everything it's going to do. You can scroll down and view that. If you hit install here, it will actually run through each one asynchronously, step by step, and then print out done when it's done installing that portion. And now if it does fail on any one of these, it will attempt to roll back the entire thing, and it won't essentially have anything installed. So keep that in mind when installing. If it runs into any kind of error, it'll kind of reset the state as if the install never happened. And then you can see it's complete, and you should be able to view the logs if you need to. Add and remove is pretty typical as any other Windows program. Upgrades as well. You would just run the new installer, and it'll just essentially kind of do that on its own. The client installer, this is a picture of it. It looks pretty similar, a lot less options here. It basically just installs everything in this 1.5 version. For the 1.6 version, we do have a change in it to let you select which modules you want to install and only install those. But the 1.5 version will install everything. You may not be able to use all of them, but they'll all be installed. It installs in the same way, completes in the same way, upgrades and uninstalls are the same way as well. Wanted to go over some of the features we've added to the data collector service and the different device features we've added in 1.5. We have added the ability to natively drive the analog outputs on the 8864. So prior to 1.5, what we would do is set up a separate Modbus service from Prism to the 8864 in order to drive those analog outputs, which obviously worked fine, no issues there, but it was a little bit of an overhead having another service running just in order to set some analog outputs. So in Prism 1.5, we've made the ability to do that all in a single service, and analog outputs are just another point type that we're able to set and read in the Prism data collector service. How this works is we utilize the 8864's internal math constants to actually set the values, and then there is an internal calculation that is looking at those math constants and setting the actual analog output to whatever is in that math constant. And then when we read out, Prism reads out from the 8864, it's actually reading the actual analog output channel kind of as a verification to make sure that the math constant calculation are all set up correctly. So here's a look at what that point address schema looks like. Its number is separated by a colon. So the left side of the colon would be the actual read address of the point that we're reading, which is 201 in this example. And on the right side of the colon, it would be, let's see, the actual set address. So we're setting math constant number 1 here. You can see this is a screenshot we've tunneled into the same 8864. The left session here shows us the actual math constant, and what it looks like, and then the right session here shows us the channel and what it's looking at. It's looking at that A01 math constant. So that channel is going to be whatever that math constant is. Kind of a diagram of it. So we start over here on the left with the Prism. You've probably seen this before. You right click on an analog output and this dialog comes up. You type in your value here. It's going to go to the controller math constant, which is set here, which is also driving our analog output, which our devices are looking at. But this math channel here is actually what Prism uses to read back in. So it actually reads the value back here through that. Here's kind of a screenshot. So we have on the left side the Prism application open. We're going to set the value here to mid scale, which is 50. This is scale 0 to 100. And then you can see if we go over here, our milliamps have changed to 12, which is mid scale for the analog output. And then you can see we read it back here at 50 back in the Prism application. Some of the main application features and enhancements we've done in 1.5. First one you may notice is incompatible versions message. So on application startup, if the database version and the client version are different, you may see this bottom message here pop up on the loading screen that it's detected a version mismatch. Typically, it will give you 2 options, either proceed or exit. If you don't click anything, it will keep proceeding. It will open the application anyway, but you do have the option to exit here if you want to. If the versions are too significant, or we've detected that this version is completely incompatible, it may prevent execution, and the only option here will be the exit button, and you'll be forced to upgrade the client application. This is because obviously version incompatibility could cause issues with your system, so you would want to upgrade generally, but this does now give you a warning message. We've also added a user logins table. So this is more of an internal or IT infrastructure kind of thing, but we have added this SQL table that will track anytime anyone has logged in or out of any Prism application or module or anything like that. It also tracks the version they're using and the user ID of who logged in and out. It's really for analytical information only. We don't use it anywhere in Prism, but that data is now available. New framework feature we're pretty excited about is the audit log capability. So this is going to be an ongoing feature that we're going to implement over time that will apply to all of our configuration objects in Prism as we add more functionality to some of those objects. So for example, if you go in and make a change to some sort of configuration or setup object in Prism, it will automatically track who made the change, when they made the change, and what that change was. And then Prism will also be able to display that running log of changes, so that you'll be able to go back and see, okay, this was changed by so-and-so on this date and time. That's why the value is the way it is. Just an extra level of audit tracking, and that will be applied to almost every configuration item in Prism going forward. Here's an example of it for our sequences. So we're looking at sequences here. We've selected the AutoCal sequence. This is the icon here. It may be a little hard to see, but it's a little calendar with a clock on it indicating, view the history of this particular object. So these are the changes that we've made over time to the AutoCal sequence. You can see who made them, when, and approximately what was changed. There's nothing extra you have to do to get this audit log to populate. It populates itself automatically anytime you save any object in Prism. Here's an example of viewing it on the bottle manager. We're looking at this cal gas here. We've hovered over it. You can see the values we've changed for that, as well as expected values. So those are the three places we put that in Prism 1.5, and again, we'll be expanding that going forward to give you more visibility. Pretty big feature we've added for 1.5 that we're pretty excited about is the new Calibrations Now Running screen. This screen is designed to aid in basically everything you need to know for running a calibration real time. So all of the information required for you to ensure that you're passing your calibration, your instruments are performing, Prism's performing, your calibrations and compliance data is correct. We wanted to put on a single screen that operators could follow along with and troubleshoot all aspects of their QA events. To give an example of it, so we're on the Sequences tab here, and we've hit the Start Sequence button. Anytime Prism 1.5 detects any sequence that's running, it will pop up a new tab down here at the bottom that is only visible when a sequence is running. So the calibration running screen doesn't really make sense when nothing's running, so it will disappear if there's no sequences running. But if there is one running, it'll be here. You can click on it, and it will take you to the new calibrations running screen, which looks essentially like this. This is a tabbed interface, so multiple sequences will be multiple tabs. You can tab through them. And this is pretty much the layout designed to reflect a single sequence that's running and all the information you need to know about that sequence. This sequence is the AutoCal sequence, so you can see the step information over here on the left. You can see the sequence name description. There's even the audit log icon. You can see any changes made to that sequence. Bottle information down here at the left, and sequence status information, tell you the last time it ran, things like that. The middle portion is designed to give you more contextual information, things like the current step, what's the IO that's running for the current step, the current instrument values, and then you have your timelines at the bottom. Your current timeline with the arrow being the current step, and then this your overall timeline is the bit smaller one across the top that will eventually be the end of the sequence. And you do have a start button here. Stop button here. If you click on that, it will prompt you with a confirmation. Are you sure you want to stop the sequence? Permissions enforced, all that kind of stuff as well. The instrument indicators are designed to kind of give you all the detail you need to know about your limits for that particular instrument. This is kind of a test system, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but this will be an instrument name here. You can see by the graph where your values are. This one is into the warning, which is the alternate spec area based off the current value. So it has turned, the whole thing has turned yellow. The measurement values have turned yellow as well, and the expected values are down below that. And you can see the trend line here will go up and down with the instrument values. You can see the multiple sequences running at the same time here, and you can flip through those as they run. And this screen is just kind of a stress test screen that shows the number of steps and IO points that this will support. We did some stress testing of it and tried to max it out on both of those, and you can see that it does support a lot of that. So hopefully this is a handy feature. Gives you some more visibility into the sequences that are running. Another feature we've added to the Prism main application is that multiple sequences can now run at the same time per device. This is something that the 8864 natively supports that the SpectraPack did not. So initially Prism did not support it, but Prism 1.5 now detects that it's an 8864. It has that capability, and you can run multiple sequences on that same device at the same time, provided that the I/O doesn't overlap. So Prism will check that and will disable the start button if you're trying to run two sequences with the same I/O. Only one non-device sequences can run at a time. This is a Plan 1.6 update. I don't think non-device sequences, which are sequences that are running Prism only, are used a whole lot of places, so it may not affect a whole lot of people, but that's kind of an internal thing. Alternatively, at the device level, if you wanted to start off multiple 8864 sequences that share I/O, you can, and there's a setting in the 8864 for those to be queued up and then run after the current sequence is finished. So that's a config option that we can help you with if you want that. We also added some additional stale data message checks. So in the qualifier, we've added some checks to the 10-second tables, the 1-minute tables, and the qualified data tables to print out messages if they are significantly behind where they're supposed to be. So that runs about every 15 minutes, and the day log messages will come in the event some sort of stale data is found. Another thing we've added that you will probably interact with is the new alarms administration screen. This is kind of part of a larger ongoing effort to kind of build in more configuration ability, capability, more power functionality, and more visibility on your configuration into Prism. So this new screen is designed to let you do anything and everything with an alarm, and it's designed to allow you to search through those clearly, see what's going on, see your configuration, and give you all the options you need to work with alarms. This is kind of what the screen looks like a little bit initially. There's three main sections of the alarm screen. There's filters on the very left here. This general middle section is the listing of existing objects, which in this case are alarms. There's things like sorting. You can search through here as well. You can add a new alarm in here. And then the right-hand pane is generally your details or your editing workspace for the particular selected alarm. So an alarm would be selected in here, and then its details or it would be edited on the right-hand side. Gives you a little more information about it. Kind of went over that a little bit. So here's a zoom in on the filter and then what happens to the main section. You can filter on alarm type or reporting group. If you want to show active or inactive alarms, you can do that as well. And then this main area content will change out based off that criteria. This is showing searches you type here. And then of course a refresh would repull all the items from the database. So here we select the flow monitor alarm, and then you can see all the details for that particular alarm shown on the right. That's all the information we have about the alarm, everything we wanted to show over there on the right-hand side. So you have absolutely everything you need for that alarm. And then there is a toggle switch that allows you to go from that view mode into an edit mode. So you've selected the alarm, you hit edit. All of these turn into edit boxes. Obviously that's permission enforced. So providing the user has permission to edit, the edit boxes here all contain validation and watermark messages to kind of make the editing easier. Then there's a save and a discard changes as well. The ability to delete an alarm, make it active or inactive as well. So all that should be there that you need to use for editing alarms. We refactored the alarms add wizard. So those are for existing alarms. If you click that add button to add a new alarm, it'll walk you through similarly to how it does now. Walk you through an easy to use wizard where you fill out the different options for that alarm, and it kind of guides you through adding the alarm value. So some more miscellaneous features we've added to the main application. Flow to load now supports steam units. Some mid-quarter ECMPS component code to support switching out components in the same quarter. We ran into an issue with that. So that should now be seamless. If you update your monitoring plan, it will use the correct component even if that has been changed out multiple times mid-quarter. We added the ability for a larger alarm delay. So you may not know, but we do have the capability to delay an alarm that says basically this condition needs to exist for X number of seconds before we publish the alarm in an effort to try to get rid of some IO fluctuations and nuisance alarms. We've now bumped that delay up to 5 minutes, so you can make sure that a condition exists for 5 minutes before we actually publish the alarm. We have made some performance enhancements to the Prism main application specifically. Some of our tests here indicate 20 to 40% faster loading time for some of the pages here. So you should definitely notice a speed difference using Prism 1.5, particularly over 1.4. We've added the ability to stop a sequence if it's been started on the 8864. For some of you that like to use the 8864's handy front panel menu, you can go in there, start a sequence. Prism will detect that in the Prism application automatically. I'll bring up the Cal now running page if applicable, and then you can stop a sequence anywhere in Prism that was started on the 8864 if you need to. Some internal, more support-related things. We've added the ability to override some ECMPS sample type codes, and we've added the data broadcast receive service to the list of services if that's installed for your particular application. You can see that located down here on the right-hand side. So that's the main application. Getting into the linearity and CGA module, we've added some features to those. The first one is the reporting notes column. So this is designed to kind of give you the ability to essentially tag a linearity test or a CGA test after it's already run, to give it some post-test notes that will help remind you or the reporter at some later point and date when you're reporting the test what this test was about. And if you want to report this or some context around why this test was run, it's completely optional. It's nothing that's reported to the EPA. It's just there to kind of give you the ability to kind of tag a test with some notes. If you're like me and your memory sometimes at the end of the quarter isn't what it was at the beginning of the quarter, this should help out come reporting time. I've added some code to auto-determine the unit status. So when you're starting a new linearity test, this is the screen here. There's a drop down that tells you where you select the unit status, whether this is an online or an offline test. We've added some code in there to actually pull and populate that value with what Prism thinks the state of the unit is for you. Add the ability to enter in mercury expected values for a linearity, for a mercury linearity. So if your system is configured with the other expected values, you can see the low, mid, and high level expected values over here. If you click and enter those in Prism as expected values, when you go to run your linearity test, those will already be pre-populated with what you put in your expected values there. So I would suggest doing that. That way you don't have to keep up with the expected values as much. I've also added some code to check the last test date. So for a linearity test, if all the instruments that you selected to be part of your new test that you're going to start have already had an online past linearity in the last 30 days, it will pop up this message that says, hey, this really is probably not going to mean anything because the tests need to be at least 30 days apart, and you've already had one in the last 30 days that passed for all these instruments. So it just gives you that kind of that warning, but you can click close and you go ahead and start your linearity anyway. It's just an extra warning for the user. We did add the mercury acceptable range checks. So your mercury expected values I was talking about a little earlier obviously have some concentration requirements based on the span of the instrument. We put those checks into the linearity module when starting a mercury linearity, and you can see the error messages those give you here, and then it gives you the invalid bottle message as well, which you can override and go ahead and start the test anyway. Obviously any of these overrides where we give you a message and you go ahead and start anyway could result in something not counting or not being reportable, things like that. But we wanted to give you the option to go ahead and ignore it. We officially added a single run CGA option. So for the CGA module, you can now run a single run CGA, even though I don't believe that's anywhere in any kind of rules. There is an actual single run CGA. So basically that's ignored by Prism. We don't use it for any qualification or reporting of the data at all, but the option is here and you can run it if you want to. Kind of big change we've added is that you can run now a linearity and a CGA simultaneously. This is for sites that have instruments and probes and IO and bottles that are set up to share and be able to do that. So obviously the concentration of the bottle, the IO, all that kind of stuff has to line up. But there are quite a few sites that do have that set up with maybe a CO instrument in with some Part 75 instruments, and the bottles and everything line up. This will essentially allow you to run CGA along with your linearity and then save all that bottle and time and effort with running the CGA again, just for the CO instrument separately. So basically what you do is you drive this all from the linearity module, not the CGA module. Start a new linearity test, select all your Part 75 instruments, and then an also run CGA checkbox will be enabled if your system configuration is set up for that. Then you select the CGA instruments that you want to include and then hit start. And effectively what is happening is a CGA test is running inside the linearity module for those instruments. They start and finish together. If they abort together. And then you have two separate test results and two test reports that are created, one for the linearity and one for the CGA. Here's kind of an example of that. So you can see we've got our instruments here. We just selected the Part 75, NOx low, and then we've hit, and you can see this is the linearity module. And then you can also run CGA, and then we select our CO low, which shares that ball and IO information. And then hit your automatic, which will start a new automatic test. And you select your instruments. And this is the layout of the linearity module that you'll be greeted with. It looks pretty similar. This is only one instrument here. You can see the bottle and all that information should look pretty familiar. But then now there is a new flip view arrow that's to the right hand side of the screen. If you flip back, that will slide over your linearity view and you'll be looking at your CGA view here on the right hand side. And this is not a real setup because we don't have an instrument here, but it would show the instrument, the runs, all that kind of stuff. And it says up at the top CGA view, and this one says linearity view. So there's two different views there, and you can kind of slide back and forth while the test is running, check and see if both are passing, everything you need to do with that. When you're finished, you should have two different reports. It'll take you to this linearity one. Sorry, take you to this linearity one. There's also a view CGA button. If you hit that, it'll take you to the CGA report. So you can view them both immediately in the linearity module, but then going back in later, your CGA test will be listed in the CGA module and your linearity test in the linearity module where they should be. So all that should still be the same. So that's the linearity module. The data editor module, I'll kind of go over quickly. We've added some enhancements to the recalculation estimations. We've now have a start time and end time, an estimated end time, percentage complete. We've added to that, so that'll kind of give you more visibility as your calculation is ongoing about how long it's going to take based off of when we started and how much left we have to go. And you can see that's down here as well. We'll work how many recalcs we're working on, percent completed, and estimated time of completion. So that's in the data editor module. We've also added the ability to specify the configuration team which digitals can be turned on and off and which analogs can be marked as bad in the data editor. So this allows us to be able to turn on or off any digital or mark any analog as bad. Before we were just doing, I think it was limited to the online signal, things like that. But we can configure that to be anything you need us to, anything maybe coming from the plant or any kind of instrumentation. And then when you go in the data editor, those options will be available for you. Here's the change digital status. So these are the points we've set up that can be turned on and off. And then you select them. You can also multi-select by holding down Shift or Control, and then put them in the new state, and it will change them for the date and time range that you've selected. Here's a multi-select. Here's marking analog data points as invalid. You can see these are the options we have. And you can multi-select again and then mark those as invalid. We have provided the framework to the ability to override analog values. So if you have a Prism system that has lost some sort of analog input for multiple hours or days, and you can pull that information from, say, Pi or the plant and substitute that in. We do have now a mechanism of doing that. It's currently only used by the ESC Spectrum support. There's no editor screen to do that yet, but the framework is there. It is supported now, so we just need to develop a screen to allow users to do that on their own. One thing we did add to the data editor is editing multiple constants at the same time. So if you previously had, let's say, 3 constants for last quarter that you wanted to edit, previously you would have to go in and edit the first constant, let it recalc, go in and edit the second constant, let it recalc. Now you can edit all 3 as long as they're the same time range at once and do a single recalc. So basically all you do here is go in, you select the constant, so we're looking at this, put in the new value. You would click on the other record, select that constant, put in the new value, and you can do that as many times in this screen as you want until you go through and next and confirm, and then we'll actually edit. So you can see the ones we've changed have a little asterisk here, meaning they're in bold, and this is the new value we put in here as well. So that hopefully will be handy for those types of situations. We have added the ability to lock the data. So if there's some data that you don't want any kind of recalculation process to recalculate over, you can go through and lock that data. Basically hit new task, go through, lock data is now the last option here. Click next, select your time range you want. Typically this would be the previous quarter or something like that. Hit next and select what you want to lock. You can lock 1-minute data if you want to, or qualified data, or both. Probably a more common scenario would be after you reported to lock the qualified data, which would probably only be the hourly or multi-hour data tables that you want. Hit next. It'll give you a confirmation page. Again, put in any comments and hit finish, and that's now locked. There is a new tab on the data editor called Lock Data. You can look at that tab and see what data has been locked. And then there's the ability there to unlock that data if you need to, which essentially removes that lock. So what does Lock Data do? It basically prevents any recalculation from recalculating or reevaluating that particular data block. It doesn't prevent the recalculation from occurring. It will just kind of skip over those records that overlap on the lock data that you've added. We also added this message to any kind of recalculate or data change that you're attempting to do. If it overlaps any part of a locked data entry, it will warn you here on the final confirm page for the operation that you're about to perform. So that's the data editor, the opacity module. We do now validate filters based off the opacity's emissions limit that you enter in the module. So here's the rules for those here, the low, mid, and high spans. When specifying a new run must reach a certain concentration, not concentration, but filter requirement values. And here's kind of what that looks like in the opacity module. You can see our low, mid filter values. We enter those in here. When they're corrected, these corrected values didn't meet our expected range based off of our emissions limit for this particular installation. So you'll see a little validation errors here, which you can correct. Bug fixes. So Prism 1.5, I'll kind of go over these a little bit quickly. These are some of these you may or may not have seen. Some of them are internal, or some are smaller in nature, but I'm going to kind of go over them anyway. If you've acknowledged an alarm and it's incorrect UI state, I think it was still flashing or it was the wrong color for the flash, That's been fixed in Prism 1.5. That now flashing works correctly. The raw point scaling is not always updated. If you update the point scaling, sometimes you would have to restart the current client for that point scaling to be updated. That has been fixed. It's saved after you've edited it, and then you restart the client. That should be good to go. For some compliance data, excuse me, data where we've done data substitution. On the data substitution, it wasn't respecting the rounding that we set it to previously. So you can see the initial data was correct and rounded to the correct values, but the substituted data was not. So that has been fixed. Now rounded to the correct decimal precision. Some locked incidents still editable in the downtime tab. So when you go to downtime and you edit those instruments, there is the ability to edit those incidents. There is the ability to lock those incidents so that no one else can come back later and modify those after they've been reviewed and are good to go. There was a bug where those were still able to be edited. Now they no longer can. Yep, the locked incidents, if a bunch of incidents are selected, the locked ones will essentially be skipped. We did some work on the multi-hour recalculations for qualified data. So if you have 30-day, 3-hour, multi-hour, and you wanted to recalculate or change some data that would affect not only the current hour, but obviously the next 3 hours or the next 30 days, we fine-tuned that process to go ahead and initiate the recalcs that would be affected for the multiple hours and multiple days as well. Small issue with complex stack missing data, not working with the MODC codes. That's been fixed. So if you had any of those kind of errors reporting, those are probably fixed in 1.5. The LTFF records for LTFF systems were generated. They just weren't put in the XML file. I think that was actually version 1.4.2 that was released to our LTFF customers. So that's now working in 1.5. Those records are included with your XML report. There was a bug with active page sometimes, and the navigation wasn't currently selected correctly. So you can see here we're on the calibrations tab, but the home tab is still selected, so that's been fixed. The SIMS time, a couple of you have run into that, I believe, where the SIMS time was not the correct time. The time that you read down here on your client application should always be the SIMS time of the server. It essentially should ignore whatever the time is of your computer that you're running on. It should be this 503 of the server, should have been listed up here. So now that is correct. You can see it's 1710. Wrong report shown in the opacity module. If you clicked view report and actually got the wrong report, it was a little refresh issue that we fixed. That should now be fixed correctly. The ability to start a new NDFA test wasn't available after you had backed out of a previous one. So we fixed the little refresh issue there, and now you can go back in and restart a new filter audit test. And initially, after you backed out of one, the breadcrumb at the top was incorrect. This is before the test has even run, so none of these bars should be filled out. That's been fixed. And now when you start a new test, it does look correct there. Along opacity model number with serial causes the report to look weird. We've tweaked that and adjusted that. That should be better. The view report link shows up for aborted or failed opacity test. There is no report for an aborted opacity test, so those shouldn't have been showing up. That's been fixed. You can see that's now disabled for those tests that have been aborted. This is similar to the long model number here. It caused an error before. We fixed that where those actually show up. Same thing for the input link on the validation. It now validates and won't let you put in more characters than the database can handle on the installed location specifically. Trend minimum or maximum was starting with a decimal point, not something that is typically done, but if you do have a very small range instrument and you want to see it 0.1 to 0.2, before that would cause an error in Prism, that's now supported, and you can enter decimal points when starting ranges. So that's pretty much it for the new features and the bugs for Prism 1.5. Wanted to go over a little bit of 1.6 stuff, new features that will be coming to 1.6. Usual disclaimers here. Some of this may change by the time it makes it to 1.6. Priorities may change, requests may change, things like that. But to kind of give you an idea of what may be coming down the pipe. Something we've added is the Windows style notifications. So you can see over on the left-hand side here, just like Outlook or other Windows applications, if Prism has an important application level message, typically I think this is for failing system backup or something like that, this message would come in here. You can see it just like other Windows applications as well. Here's a look of it in the Action Center. You can see they're all grouped together. Here's a backup message. You can see the plant it came from and the time it came in as well. So hopefully that's kind of handy. We have added a new feature to the main application called Enable Preview Features. We're hoping those will kind of give us the ability to put small parts or features of Prism out to you guys and the users and things that we're thinking about, and hopefully get your feedback on and engage more of your thoughts and more of you all in the development process before those features are actually finished and ready to actually be put in the application. So those were our thoughts with enabling this toggle switch here. So if you have the Prism main application and you want to turn that on, hopefully with each release there may be a few preview features bundled with that release that you can go check out and give us your feedback on, and that would be really helpful to development going forward. First preview feature that hopefully will be in 1.6 is this site configuration tree view. So this is designed to kind of give you a better idea of the overall top-down configuration of your Prism system. So it's going to be designed to show every Prism object in the system and its relationship to its parent and the things that depend on it, and then all the information about that particular object. So if you go to site administration, there's a site view here. You can see this clearly says it's in preview feature. Basically start with the overall site. This one's called the training room. You can see our reporting groups here, SSI training. We've drilled down. Here's all of our qualification reports. Here's our hourly Part 75 data report. We could click on that. Clicking on anything over here on the left would show details about it on the right. We've expanded our stack probe, and we've expanded the Knox low range instrument. Here you can see these 3 tags associated with that, any QA events associated with it, our low range 0 and our low range span, even what bottle that particular span is using, and the tag that comes on with that particular span. So it's really designed to kind of give you the ability to drill down into where your numbers are coming from, the configuration of things, even your hourly calculations, where those are coming from. And again, you select anything over here and you should be able to see all the detail we have on it in the system in the right-hand pane. Alarm actions redesign. So we've talked about the alarms administration screen. This is the alarm outputs administration screen. Kind of be following the same UI principles as the alarms themselves. That should allow you to hook up outputs or emails or tags to an alarm, which is essentially what happens when an alarm comes on and off. So that screen should be redesigned as well. Some minor miscellaneous updates I don't have screenshots for. There's going to be some minor enhancements to the calibrations now running screen. We've had some feedback on that, so there's some smaller things that will go into that. We're working hard to improve support for the 8864 configuration. We will hopefully have the ability to edit, save, and download a per point configuration from Prism to the 8864, so you will be able to name points in Prism, give them scales, things like that, and then save and push that directly down to the 8864. Also use scale values for the 8864 analog inputs, so we'll no longer be restricted to just using the counts and then doing the conversion. Working on a trends administration redesign, which is going to follow the alarms administration redesign. Client installer, we're going to work on so that you can install optional modules or select the modules you want as part of your installation. We have some UI enhancements and current running relative accuracy to the linearity module that we're hopefully going to make as well. So that's pretty much everything I had for Prism 1.5 and a little look into 1.6. Does anyone have any questions?
Someone asked, when is 1.5 released? It has already been released.
Yes, I should have mentioned that. Probably the first thing I should have mentioned, but yeah, it has been released this week, so it's available for download. I know January is a busy month, but if you've already got everything squared away, it is available for install.
All righty. Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.